Okay, I think we got something to sync stuff now.
Do you need something on this too?
That's rolling.
But like for syncing, or does it matter?
Hearing those claps,
Oh, okay.
the audio in that, all the audio in the cameras will have that spike from the claps. And then when I mix the audio, those will have those claps in there too, and that'll be my way of syncing everything up.
I used that trick, and we can consider this part of the thing too. Like I just assumed that we're just rolling, but I used that trick after that when I started making those like little guitar Instagram videos. Like a couple of them I didn't do anything else. I just ran the speaker out of the camera, but I think for a couple of them I did like mic them up on an amp, and I used that trick I saw you do with the claps to line it up. I was like, yeah, this does the trick.
Yeah, it's
awesome.
like those old-fashioned clapper boards where just having a good strong transient in there where you can it's so much easier to sync stuff up, and everything's digital, so you don't have to deal with like drift or speed variations or anything.
Yeah.
So it ends up being like pretty painless with like putting it all together.
Yeah. So what year was it that we shot that first INDUMENTUM video?
Oh gosh, yeah, it's like crazy how fast that flew by. I think that was like 21.
I think you're right. It had to be around then, because I had just gotten that amp that I'm playing in that video like not that long before that. And we went and shot it at my day job office.
Yeah.
We had to go in there on a weekend in like the camera room in there, and it was probably loud as shit in that room with that amp in there. But like I was telling you before we sat down and before we kind of made this plan, in the time since then, I've kind of learned more how the INDUMENTUM works in a guitar rig. So I wanted to revisit it because I don't think I really showed the last time like how I use it. And I've noticed too, like as much as I like it, whenever I've lent it to people or I've shown people that video, like they don't quite understand what it is. So I figured we could get a little bit more into that, because I think it's a really useful circuit, and it's kind of slept on. So I guess first, like, what made you want to make an overdrive pedal, and like kind of what were you like thinking about when you were putting this design together?
Well, one of the first the first concept I made was like a microphone preamp that had like a three band tone control in it, like an overdrive stage, and a delay circuit, and it was kind of like the overdrive one. It was more just like distortion.
Yeah.
And while that can be cool in some applications with putting distortion on your voice, it left me like I kind of actually just wanted something that gave more range and how loud you can make the signal before it breaks up. So it was like I was like, that's like an overdrive. And so I started to try to come up with like sort of like a starting point was like trying to work on like building a clone of something that was popular overdrives. And one of the resources I used, I think it was like electrosmash.com, and they had super awesome like breakdowns of a lot of really interesting and popular pedals, one of which was the Klon Centaur.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh yeah, this one's the lore around that. I was like, yeah, this would be kind of cool. This would be a good starting point to like see if I can build this, and then see how I can mix it all up and make it my own. And I didn't succeed at building that. Like I tried, and I was like, I just couldn't get anything to work. Like I was early on with things, and it was just couldn't get anything functional on a breadboard. So then I was like, well, I ended up kind of falling back into other things that I've used that worked, and the fuzz face, which isn't an overdrive.
Yeah.
Kind of like, let me just see if I can make this work, and found some versions of that and got it cobbled together on a breadboard, and then ended up making the crustacean. And so I kind of like still like didn't get back onto the overdrive thing until some period of time went by that I gained more understanding with like op amps and just like meat and potato circuit design, and just how to do gain stages with op amps, and hunkered down and just try to figure out how to make a overdrive circuit that could take a signal and make it nice and loud before it breaks up, but then also give me the ability to cross that line and get crunchy with it. and the the use of it wasn't so much only for guitar, but for like drum machines.
Yeah.
I had a drum machine that didn't have any sort of drive on it, and it was like it really it benefited from putting gain onto any of those drum sounds. So the Indumentum circuit was kind of like trying to create something that didn't have too much going on with like coloring the sound. So there, I didn't put EQ in there, and also something that with a lot of overdrive pedals, they typically filter out a lot of low end.
Yeah.
Ideally to sort of shine for guitar frequencies and not have too much low end going into the gain stages and muddying it up.
Mm-hmm.
But with the Indumentum, the circuit design there was trying not to filter out very much low end. So, for example, a kick drum going through it from a drum machine wouldn't be so flat.
Right. That's where it really, for me, kind of shined, is it doesn't do that, which is something that, like, when I got my first pedal, which we were talking about before we started rolling, when I was a kid, I got a tube screamer, the Ibanez Sound Tank, the plastic one, because I read that Stevie Ray Vaughan used it, and I also didn't understand really the sound I was hearing from his guitar and how that differed from, like, say Nirvana, who I was really into, which he used the Boss DS1, but I think at the time they weren't making one, and the DS2 was like a little bit more expensive and out of my price range, whereas like the Sound Tank Tube Screamer was $40. That's a couple weeks of allowance, or then it was like a month of allowance, but still, doable.
DS2 is that the turbo distortion?
Yeah, and it has a DS1 in it, but you can flip it to a turbo mode. So I got that, and I was immediately just like, I don't understand. It doesn't sound like Nirvana. I didn't know what a overdrive was. I didn't know that was different from a distortion pedal. And then I also didn't understand why it took so much of the low end out when like so many of my favorite guitar sounds had so much low end in them. Like I didn't understand that like most of what I'm hearing is actually the bass and not the guitar. Or in the case of like someone like Stevie Ray Vaughan or someone who uses a tube screamer, like you're using that to filter out the low end and boost those upper mids going into an amp that already has a lot of bass. So that, I learned that way too late in my guitar journey, that's how you use an overdrive pedal. But what's nice with this one is it does the opposite of that. It just kind of boosts everything. So if you're using a mid-forward guitar or a mid-forward amp, this really shines to just kind of push everything up. Which I found recently because like my band Spit in the Wind, when we practice, I'm using a big 60-watt tube amp. It's a Visual Sound Workhorse, which now True Tone, but they don't make the amp anymore. But it's a big 60-watt super clean tube amp that's kind of based on like Fender black panel things. So not a ton of mid-range in it. It's a little on the dark side. There's a lot of low end. So I was using my clone at practice with that, and that's what it's made for. It does take that those it boosts some mid frequencies, not quite the same as a tube screamer, like not nearly as much, and it's a different mid frequency, but and it does take out some low end, so then it's perfect for making that sound like a cranked like amp that's already like getting ready to blow up. But when I played a gig with my Tweed Deluxe using that, it was just way too like thin. Not thin isn't quite the right word, but I lost too much low end, and I also it was just way too like spiky and just like kind of like too trebly. Something was just not quite right there. So then I paired this guy with it, and it did exactly what I needed. It just kind of like pushed the whole thing up a little bit louder without getting like farty and like losing low end, because there's already, Tweed Deluxes typically have a decent amount of low end in them, but mine I've modded a couple times, and I put different filter caps in it that like kind of suck some of that, not filter caps, different caps somewhere in the tone stack that kind of like trim some of that out at first. So
yeah, capacitor changing in the tone circuit really does change what you're hearing, and it can be a lot of fun to experiment with that, because the results aren't so subtle too. You can really drastically change how that goes into the next stage, and the way the signal coming out of the speaker.
Yeah.
It makes a difference.
So with this thing, how does that work? Like once the signal enters here, what happens? Like where do we go from, like what's it kind of go through, and kind of where did some of these ideas come from for how that signal path was going to work?
Well, so really, I mean, the heart of it is a dual op amp.
Yeah.
So you have two op amps to work with, and they're inverting. So they take your signal in the first stage and inverts it, and then goes to the other op amp and inverts it again, so it comes out normal. But with those two stages, I'm playing around with the negative feedback that occurs in there, which is just taking the output, going back in the input, and having certain capacitors in, say, like the decoupling capacitor in the front of it. So your signal comes in and it goes through a capacitor that blocks DC, which is basically when you're amplifying your signal, you don't want to amplify DC coming in.
Yeah.
It can cause problems for other things and just work components.
Yeah.
So you're blocking DC with this input capacitor, basically, and the size of that input capacitor plays in relation with resistors immediately after it, and creates a filter. And so a lot of guitar amps have smaller input capacitors, and I'm using now I'm kind of feeling like I don't have the circuit memorized. And it's been a while since I've opened it up. But it's an electrolytic, and it might be a 10 UF. So with that much there, you're not really filtering out very much low end.
Yeah.
It's pretty well letting all that go through, and has the ability to give the first gain stage like your full spectrum of frequencies.
Yeah.
Now, that also can overload and cause gain to sort of, you start getting the crunch, so to speak, a lot more, because you're not taking out low end that is pretty drastic once you start feeding that back and creating additional gain.
Yeah.
And then there's a switch on there that has 10x and 2x.
Yeah.
And so that kind of gives you, I mean, really all that is just switching a resistor in and out of that feedback, that negative feedback path in the op amp, which changes how much of that signal is going back into it. And basically, I just wanted the ability to have extremes with the pedal so that I could accomplish like a clean boost, but give more girth to it.
Right.
But then also, if pretty well with 10x, take it to a point where if I wanted to have like just one pedal with my guitar, for example, I could have I wouldn't say distortion, but I mean, crunch in the signal that would allow me to have something for like an A-B, where I could have a clean and I kick this on. And if I didn't just want a boost or a clean raise in the signal, I could have something that could also just kind of work for like, to dirty up the sound for me.
Yeah.
But then after that, really the output, I can't remember. Now I'm starting to view. I can't remember how that really. If that's another op amp in the mix, but I just knew that the output was important too, because being able to drive the gain to have distortion or a very overdriven sound, that you didn't want that to be going out of the pedal always at that same strength.
Yeah.
So the output really is just there to manage that increased strength, and the feedback takes the output and just sends it back to the beginning of the circuit. So
is it sending the output signal back, or is it sending the gain signal back before it goes to the output?
I believe it's the coming right off of the now I don't want to like say because it's like
it's been a while.
It's the schematic for it. I mean, I'm like, it's almost like I'm trying to recall, like there are clipping diodes in it. I'm using LEDs for clipping diodes, but typically I've built a lot of overdrive circuits where I don't even do clipping diodes. Like you can achieve a sound with op amps and doing negative feedback, and it overdrives it. And then the clipping diodes are, they add character to the way that breakup occurs, the way that the waveform is basically rounding off at the extremes. But with this, yeah, I think it's taking it's coming off of the output because the way you play with the output affects the feedback as well.
Yeah.
So if you turn the output down, it can affect the way the feedback is influencing your signal coming out of the pedal itself.
Yeah, the feedback knob is one that took me a little while to kind of figure out how I like to use it. But it's really nice to just, sometimes it can help me just go from like a mild overdrive to like a little bit more saturated, but it distorts it in a way that's different than if you were to just like say add another gain stage or two or something. It's really cool, and you can get a lot of different tonal variations just by changing how those knobs relate to each other, which is a lot of fun. So yeah, I'll show you how kind of I've landed on using it. We're running into my Tweed Deluxe right now that I've got isolated off in another room, at least as isolated as we can get with rugs and blankets and shit like that. I've got it set a hair dirty. Mine is pretty well modded. Like I've got a master volume on it that we don't even have up super high right now. It's like maybe just a quarter, if that, of the way up. So that's killing some of the power tube distortion that you would get. But that doesn't really change that much how I would use this. I would just kind of dial the gain back probably more if I had it a little more cranked and getting a little bit more of like the natural drive out of it. But I would kind of have it like this, and then if I want a little bit more of like a pushed thing, I can turn on this Keeley compressor. Hold on, peeking my monitor here. And it's a Telecaster. It's gonna buzz. There's no way around that. But then if I need to push it into a little bit more drive, I can turn this guy on. And it's just gonna like thicken everything up a little bit more. Like even though that's isolated out, you can still feel it in the room, like how the vibration of the floor changes. Like it just gives it so much more girth. And I think in the last video, this is one thing I was talking about before we started rolling. In the last video, I had this running into my Klon, it's not a Klon, it's a Robot Pedals Half Man, but it's a really nice Klon style circuit. And it actually, I found afterwards, for the applications where you want to use this pedal, it often works better the other way around, where like I can have pedals running into this and it's still going to retain that full boost and that low end thickness, but it's just going to tighten up a little bit, or it's just going to push it into more gain. So if I turn this on with this compressor, it's driven, but it's not like, you can still tell where everything's going on. If I want to drive it more, I can just turn the level on the compressor up. And it's perfect for that. But then if I need a little more gain, I can just kick this guy in. And I can go pretty far on this before I start to really get those oscillations. And on a good bridge pickup, like that's gonna give you a pretty good amount of drive as it is. Yeah, so that's kind of how I do it there. But I mean, there are other options of this. Like you were talking about how you wouldn't necessarily call it distortion, but if we take this gain up pretty high, maybe this a little bit more, it'll get you there. But yeah, that's generally how I'll use it in most of the applications. I mean, it'll do a lot more than that, but that's it's almost, I feel like when you call it an overdrive, people instantly want to.
It's also green too.
Yeah,
so
that's
green
gonna,
overdrive. You're going
yeah,
like, oh, like it's like a tube screamer,
or like or people are thinking it's going to be a tube screamer or a Klon style or a blues driver or a blues breaker or something like that, but it's not really any particular circuits in general. So I think that can throw people off a little bit sometimes when they think about it, because they're like, well, I don't know what that is. But it really is just almost kind of a more button for the amp.
Yeah, between like the ability for the gain stages to take your signal from louder to like entering distortion territory, then the ability for the output to send out a louder signal than than where it's coming in at. It also can just be like pushing things after it into overdrive, and it's like pretty simple with like no tone controls. You're just basically playing with levels, and it just seems like you could definitely get a lot of range out of its use in a signal flow.
Yeah.
The green scheme too. I mean, because the name Indumentum, like for me, it's like I wasn't thinking like, oh, it's an overdrive. It's gotta be green. But like the name Indumentum is a reference to it's like plant biology stuff, where it's like the fuzz that's on plants essentially.
Yeah.
In some plants, more of that than others. But yeah, to me, I just kind of thought of it as like a botany term. And so I'm like, oh yeah, green and botany go. That's like what I think of. So for choosing a color scheme, and also then with like the face plates being one of the color options, and just sort of like trying to come up with a scheme. And, it was like I like green a lot, so kind of like went in, leaned into that, but then kind of didn't intentionally mean to have that correlation, it being an overdrive and being green. And it seems like it could be misleading then for somebody to look at it and just think like, yeah, tube screamer, but its versatility takes it beyond that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about as far from a tube screamer as you can get, which we'll show a little bit later on. But it stacks very nicely too. Like last time I think I showed it stacking, but in, like I said, in the opposite way. So I think like the way that pedals go into it is a really useful thing, because you can have something like this compressor that is going to impart its own tonal kind of thing on it, but it's not going to make it where it's taking away that low end, or it's taking away like the main signal gain to it. I forgot what I was saying halfway through that sentence. I do that. All right, I'm gonna take it back to where I had it before. Which I think was right about there. A little more gain, maybe. Bam, that's that guy. I guess the other thing I didn't really dig into yet is how it balances with a fuzz, because that's something that different overdrive pedals can struggle with. But if I use this Golden Fleece, which I love this fuzz pedal, I'll talk about that in a second.
Is that before or after?
Before. So a pedal like that has to go before anything with a buffer. It's a common thing with fuzz faces and other like fuzz pedals like that. Let me hit this guy too to bring some signal down. But the Crustacean, I don't think had that problem when we did that video though. That did fine after a buffer. So that does affect like where that goes and how I can use it. Like right now I don't have a wah pedal that I can use with it, which is kind of a pain in the ass, but like I can mod my wah pedal, I think, and make it work, and that'll just give me something else to do. So it's fine. But that it does have like a really nice cleanup on it. So like you could use this just on all the time and just like roll your volume back. Like I've got it here. I'm using the pickups in this Reverend too. I used they've got bare knuckle flat 50s in them, which give it that kind of like 50s Telecaster like meatiness. The stock pickups in it were awesome. But when I played it with Spit in the Wind at a gig where I had the deluxe mic'd up, I mean, this could have partially been due to using the Klon pedal too, but it was just a little too thin, and these just kind of meet it up a little bit. But yeah, with that fuzz pedal on, I've got the volume just kind of cracked a little bit, and you got a real nice chimey, and that's where they're going into the Indumentum also. I feel like a lot of fuzz pedals really benefit from either having an overdrive in front of them or going into a dirty amp. It just kind of like shaves off some of the low end and like gives you a little bit more to like cut through a mix with. And you know, you can get that real glassy like kind of Hendrix thing with it. If you want to, or you know,
Are those heavy strings?
10 to 52 on this one. I like. I've went down a rabbit hole with that over the pandemic, just like I did with all these pedals, and I spent way too much money on so much gear. Because I finally could get it. Like the whole time that I forgot to address. This is the part I wanted to bring up in this that I hadn't gotten into. Was like the whole time that I played in more active bands and like when we were living together at the Wallride house and like practicing all the time, like I didn't really have money to like try different things, and I also didn't really know that much about how any of this stuff worked, so I didn't really know what I was buying half the time or like how to use it. So for the longest time, like I used like a Boss Super Overdrive with like the gain way up as like my overdrive signal, and like it was fine, but I just like didn't understand like what that pedal was supposed to do and like how to use it. And I just always had like whatever gear worked for at the time, and then I wouldn't get anything else until something broke and I had to get something else. So during the pandemic though, you know, we were all getting the stimulus checks, and I may or may not have done some work off the books a little bit here and there for some extra cash, and you know, nothing to do but sit around and play guitar. So I bought a ton of shit and just trying different things out and kind of figured out like what I like. But one of those things, getting back to strings, was I went all the way down to 8s at one point, just kind of like trying different stuff out, and like those are really fun to play because they're so slinky. But like I couldn't do like rhythm stuff really with them without them going out of tune. Because also I pick kind of hard, and I use like pretty heavy. These are
That's
like
a heavy pick.
1.5. I switched to these at one point when I was playing in a metal band with a friend of mine. This was like years ago. I wasn't playing in his band Dead Atlantic then, but we got together to try and work on like a side project thing, and he had these like jazz picks that were like super heavy. And also, like, I always held my pick wrong the whole time that I played guitar. Like, I would hold it like this with, like, 2 fingers, which, like, some people do that and it's fine. And I would pick really heavy like that. But I would drop my pick constantly, for one. And also, like, I couldn't be, like, super precise with it. But also, I would break strings constantly because I didn't understand that you have to get guitars set up and things like that. So, like, I probably always had bridge problems and tension issues. So once I've learned those things, and then when I started playing with him, I couldn't play. When I started playing in the metal band with him, I couldn't hold a pick like this and play that stuff because it was a lot of like really intricate stuff that I can't do anymore because I haven't been practicing it. But that made me have to hold it like this, and also start using different picks, which like these are heavier and they're better for like that intricate stuff. And once I started doing that, and then I started taking lessons in 2019 to kind of get past some plateaus, and I found that these really worked a lot for pretty much everything. And then once I had things set up right, like I don't break strings really anymore. So yeah, I settled on this guitar 10 to 52. I like Telecasters to have like a decent amount of tension to them, but I also I bend a lot, so like they can't be too crazy, but on these, I find like having that heavier this side really helps for like playing aggressively and getting that like, you know. Or like something like that if you're trying to do that, or like any kind of like you're gonna get that like thickness and the kind of like resistance here that makes you just kind of like feel better about whacking it. Like and like I like the action a little high. It's not crazy. I have it like 2 millimeters, I think, on each side. That seems to be the number I've landed on after like I experimented like crazy with that. At one point I had it like silly high. And I liked it that way too, but it does get like taxing on your hand. But like it's got to have a little bit of space to it because I want to play slide too. And I'm not great with this yet. It's taken me like probably like 3 years to just get to where I can like kind of do it like competently, like not competently, but confidently enough to like kind of be a little more like express, like creative with it. Whereas like the first couple years of trying to do it, it's like you're just concentrating so hard on just trying to make it go like and not like fret out or just go like, it's like even there I'd still fret it out, but like, you know, now that I can do that a little bit more, like I've kind of settled on this being a good spot for it to be able to go back and forth and do both, because I don't want to like dedicate one guitar just to slide stuff. And that's, you know, this guy comes in handy there too. Because like that's another thing with so many other overdrive pedals that boost your high mids and cut your low end. If you're going to try and play slide on a bridge pickup on a Telecaster with a brass slide, it can get a little like hairy. But even this, like this has 500K pots in it. I've got the tone and the volume all the way up through that deluxe with the INDUMENTum on, and it's still like, even up on the high strings, it's not like piercing you. Little much if you get this guy. But that's why you have a tone knob. You know, you just. And it loves a neck pickup too. It just like, you know, get you there. I feel like that's another rarity with a lot of overdrive pedals is like, some are gonna sound really good on a bridge pickup, and that's, I feel like, typically what most people want. And some are gonna sound really good on a neck pickup, but this one, since it's just imparting, it's just basically, like you said, a more button. If you already like how the neck pickup sounds through your amp, then this is just gonna make it better. It's just gonna, you know, any overdrive pedal that boosts the gain a little bit is just gonna bring out a little bit more of that like sparkle and like three-dimensionality that a good pickup has.
I think too with the circuit design, like the max voltage input, like it's rated at like 9 volts input, but also I think you can even increase that like more factor by giving it like more voltage on the input. Like I don't know if you go above like 16 or anything, like 18 volts may not be, I don't know. It might be able to handle that, but it depends on like really your components in there. Like if you've got any capacitors, for example, where I think that's where it is like the stranglehold of it, where if you have I think the highest, the lowest rated in terms of voltage component might be electrolytic in there, or electrolytics at like 16 volts. But 12 volts, for example, if you have, like I know with some power bricks, there are like different voltage outputs in some of them. So like if you have a pedal that requires a higher voltage, but I actually think Yeah, like 12 volts on that wouldn't be exceeding, well, I think 16 is the highest. Now, I have some pedals, I think like the BitQuest by Dr. Scientist, it says on the pedal itself like 9 to, it might be 15 volts, or maybe it's 18 volts, and I don't know. Those are sort of 5 and 8s are kind of close.
Let's see. I can switch one of these to 12. Let me make sure I'm doing it right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 turns. 1, 2, 3. I want that one to be 12. I think, right? On makes it 12, off makes it 9. Yeah. And it's that white one. Come on, you dick. Here. That should be it.
So really, just giving it more voltage just increases everything. Just goes up. It just expands the range. So if you're only working with 9 volts, you've only got so much of a sort of a space to work with. By having additional voltage, it expands that space for your signal to go through. And so yeah, it's like, I think it's referred to as like headroom, but you just get more headroom with more voltage on it. Now, the effect of that, I believe, could be subtle. I wouldn't know. I feel like with meticulous study on it, you could probably discern the difference, experimenting with it. But yeah, it's sort of like an experimental aspect to it. But 9 volts is a sweet spot. Plus, with like lower voltage, it can cause clipping. You get clipping sooner, which is kind of like the intention for the overdrive, whereas you're pushing your signal to a point where it gets a little bit of, flat edges on the signal of it, so you get more of that grit in there. But higher voltages give you, I guess, more ability to make it even louder before it starts breaking up.
Yeah, I hadn't tried it on 12. I might like it a little bit better. All right, let me throw some humbuckers on this, and we can walk through that a little bit, and then we can throw it in with some other pedals.
Cool.
So yeah, with this guy,
You've switched.
just guitar. This is my Greco SG copy. Well, this is the guitar that I used in the last one, but I had different pickups in it then. That was the other thing I thought about too. We never showed it in the last one with single coil pickups, and this one has both. Like this is the Righteous Sound 1991 Gazing set. So this is kind of wound like a Jazzmaster neck pickup. And I learned from that last set that I had in here that I think I overall prefer single coil neck pickups. I mean, there are some really nice ones. A friend of mine has, my friend Ben has a Seymour Duncan Antiquity humbucker in the neck of his one Telecaster, and it's like one of the best sounding neck pickups I've ever heard. But overall, I feel like I just like that you get a little bit more high-end information from a single coil neck pickup. But this guy serves that just as well. Like, it's not gonna flub out even on like hard-hitting, like low notes. But it's not gonna flub out, but it's still gonna have like that thick low end. Whereas like when I show it a little bit later on with like the super overdrive or that rat pedal, you're gonna lose a fair bit of that.
Your lavalier came unclipped. I don't know if it is. Yeah. It was aimed downward.
Whoopsie doodle. All right, there we go.
Wow.
But yeah, when I switch over to it's not a very high output humbucker in this set, I think, but it's still just like it can sound mean if you want it to. But it also it's an asymmetrical wind, which from what I understand means it still retains like a little bit of like the characteristics of a single coil. It also like makes it less hum canceling, but like I mean, I play a Telecaster. It's you used to that. I have a noise gate if I really need one. But I've had mixed results with noise gates. I used one in the metal band because you have to have that like that thick gain and like have it still be like really tight and like, you know, you need those silent spots. And it was fine in that, but when I'm trying to use one playing like I normally do, I'm having a hard time finding that sweet spot of where it like takes away the noise, but it's not affecting the tone or like choking anything.
I never even thought about that. Like I've used noise suppressor pedals like where like I'd put like the Indumentum on a drum machine, and like if you have all that gain on a drum machine, like maybe you only have it on like the snare. Well, like in between the snare hits, it's like, you know, it's got like, it's amplifying just that silence, and it has like noise there. Well, if you put a little, you know, noise suppressor, you know, noise gate in there, it'll just clamp down when the snare's not hitting. But I have a Behringer. They're like, I forget what it's called or what the number is, but it's basically a noise gate by them. And I watched a video recently on YouTube, and it was a guy showing getting like the Boss. He got a Boss one to upgrade from the Behringer one, and then complained, or his feelings were that the Behringer one was more sufficient at not like taking away from the tone of it the way that the Boss version did. And I feel like all that stuff's kind of subjective, you know. I mean, there's so many variables that are going to play into that between the guitar and other pedals and cables and the amp and the settings on the pedals, the noise suppressor pedals themselves. But yeah, I only have known the Behringer one. I did build one time with the Craig Anderton electronic projects for musicians, but I didn't. It was very early on in my adventures with electronics, and it didn't. I don't even know if I succeed. It was like meant to work off of like a dual power supply feeding the power amps of the circuit, and I didn't know what that meant. I just thought negative was like the ground or the negative of a battery, and so basically the most of those circuits, those projects I was building, I built like real nice enclosures and stuff, but they all were like only running off of half the power they're designed for, and so some of them behave differently, and I don't think I ever got the noise gate to work right. One day I want to go back and open those things up and do some surgery and correct those issues, but yeah.
I had an electro-harmonic silencer, which what was cool about that is it has a loop in it, so I could plug my guitar into the input, so it's gonna be able to turn that delay off so it's more obvious, but it's gonna be able to pick up that internal and like use that as its gate. But then the loop is where you can put all of your gain pedals, and so it's just killing the noise from those, and then then you can send it back out to the rest of your stuff, or you can use the 4-cable method if you have an effects loop on your amp to run, like, basically you're gonna run the gain section like that, and then you're gonna run it still in the loop into the effects loop of the amp, and then out of that, and then back out, close the loop, and then come out of that into your like time-based effects. So that way you're also killing the hum from like the amp gain. And that was really nice. I didn't really do it that way too often, but I did use the other loop too often because most of my amps don't have effects loops. I just like how it sounds when things are just hitting the front of the amp. Like it's just, I mean, I like classic rock and punk rock and things that sound dirty. So like, you know, I like that. getting back to that thing, what screwed me there was I was at a band practice one night and I was talking and like switching out some pedals because I was going from playing at home to the metal band practice, and I use a totally different setup at home and I wasn't paying attention to what I was doing. And this guy, the Topanga from Cattle and Bread, runs at 18 volts. Like you can run it at 9, but if you run it at 8, it's a similar thing to this guy, like the INDUMENTUM, where like it's just more headroom. It just gives you like a little bit more. This is more. I don't know what it is. It sounds
without
better.
breaking up.
So I wasn't paying attention and I pulled the plug out of that and plugged it into the silencer and killed it. Which like it's just a safety diode in most of those that blows, but I never like felt like taking the time to figure out how to swap that out. So I got like the little tiny Decimate pedal instead, because I still needed a noise gate for that band. And like that worked fine for that band, but it's another thing where it's like, I bet if I really wanted to spend time on it and I could fix that electro harmonics pedal, and I could probably use both of those together to get the option I want, because I've seen a lot of people do that, especially in like pro rigs and stuff like that, where it's like you have a noise, like a suppressor at the beginning that's kind of just taking away the hum from the guitar and just kind of triggering everything else. And then you've got one a little bit later on that's doing a little bit more to like kill the noise from the gain pedals. I just don't worry about it with with the stuff that I do, because the noise, it does get really noisy if I have the fuzz pedal and the compressor on and an overdrive. Even with humbuckers, like that guy adds signal, and like there are times when I might have like I'll use that to bring it down a little bit. There's times I might have all that on, like because it just gets this huge like rock sound. The MacBook gave up.
I heard that fade out.
And it just rules. But yeah. So, but like, if I have that like that, I'm playing. Like, I'm not having too many times where I'm like stopping and it needs to be quiet. So I don't really worry about it that much.
Where's your tuner in the signal flow? I don't know how your sort of the chain works here. Is the tuner second, or is the second from the input, or second from the output?
I'll walk you through.
Because I like to use I have the Boss TU2, and I have it like pretty well at the end, and it's almost just like the mute. I use it as like a mute.
Yeah.
Or like just use it, turn it on for like for tuning, but it also mutes the signal. I'm like, oh, that's nice. Between like when I'm sitting at the desk and recording, like just a quick, okay, no more.
That plays into why it's where it is. So I put it. I forget where I saw. I think I might have seen this from one of like the Does It Doom videos or something else. Because I always thought for the longest time that it had to be the first thing in the signal, but it actually doesn't. From
like
what I
buffer.
understand. Yeah, well, that's part of it, because like I said, that Golden Fleece pedal can't have a buffer before it. So right away, that tuner pedal can't go before that. And then, but if I put it, the way I have it right now is I go into the compressor first. That's because it's true bypass. So it's not going to affect the Golden Fleece in a negative way. And I also really like how it works with the Golden Fleece. Like, let me take my signal down so I don't go crazy, because it's like, I love how the Golden Fleece sounds, but by itself, but it can be a little woolly sometimes. But then if I throw this onto it, it just like gets a little more clarity and definition. I mean, that's just, everyone loves that sound. It's so good. So that's why those go that way. And then from there, I go into the INDUMENTUM, because those are ultimately this is going to be kind of like the last big like gain distortions phase. So like, if my amp is like this and with these humbuckers, it's going to be a little more broken up than it would have been at the same point. So it's already got a little bit of hair on it. But then if I hit this, I've got a nice thick like rock sound. So that's what I want to kind of be the bass line of like where that is. That's why it's last, because that's gonna have the biggest impact on the tone of the rest of the chain, is the last one of these pedals here. So I've got it set right there where I can do that. I can like dial in a little bit more if I want to, but it's still not like super noisy. It's not feeding back me, partly because it's in there, but even if I was standing in front of it, it would maybe give me a little bit of feedback, but it's not going to be unmanageable. And I don't really use that second side of it a whole lot, but it is nice to have it there, and it does like really help out. So if I got that there, then I can hit it with this too if I need more. And it'll hold for a while. So like, that's gonna cover a shit ton of ground. And then if I need fuzz, I can just leave this pedal on and run this into it, and I'll balance it with the deco. And it's just gonna... Golden Fleece is also like a kind of a low gain fuzz. So like it's not like, to me it's not a fuzz face circuit. It's like this pedal called the Fuzzy Nuts, but he's tweaked it over time, so it's not even really that anymore. It's its own thing. But it to me sounds like a really good fuzz face. Like it just like doesn't have the problems that I get from fuzz faces, and the cleanup on it is awesome. But it'll retain that through the Indumentum. And like you can use it that way on this neck pickup and not like really like flub out too bad. So if you need your like, your stoner doom band needs riffs, this has got them. Anyway, and then if I really need more there, I can throw this. See how much of a volume jump that is without the deco turning it down.
The compressor, out of the compressor into the Golden Fleece, which is bringing fuzz. Then the Indumentum, which is boosting to just like loudness and even to the realms of distortion with certain things pushed enough.
Yeah.
Then now that goes into Topanga.
Yeah, this is a spring reverb that Cattle and Bread made, and it's supposed to be emulating kind of the old like outboard tube tanks, and I've talked with the Flying Faders guys about this a bunch, where it's like there's nothing really does that except those tanks, but this gets pretty close to it, and then the other thing with this too is it replicates the preamp that's in those. You can have that either always on or only on when the pedal's on. So I use that as like another like volume boost. So like I have it to be like kind of a subtle volume boost right now because it's gonna get boosted with all these other guys too.
Yeah.
But it'll do like the crazy like reverbs. take the mix. You can take it all the way wet if you want. Or you can take it all the way dry and just have that boost come into it. But I usually kind of have it about like here.
That has a tone on there? Does that have any tone control?
It can get pretty bright. I usually kind of keep it there. I want it to give it like
noon kind of flat, and then to the clockwise is more like treble, more higher, brighter, and then
I think it's still
lower.
giving you some brightness at noon, but I don't know where unity would be, and it'd be hard to tell without the. This guy gave up on us. Doing all right, buddy? Let me see if I just like move this around, if that does anything. I don't think I like hurt the speakers in it. I don't know. Anyway. But yeah, I keep it there, and it's really nice for leads. If I've got this guy going, it's just like a really nice little kind of like air. I'll take the mix usually maybe there. If I just want kind of a standard lead, I'll hit it there so it's not like super overwhelming. But you can do all kinds of different things with it. But that's kind of where I use it there, and that's a nice, because like I was saying before, like this is gonna give you the main like tone of it, but it's also gonna kind of set the output of everything before it. Like these pedals will boost that and make it louder, but they're only gonna make it so much louder with that being there. But then having this with its preamp in it, I can take the volume up a little bit more because this is a volume that's after that. So it's like if I need just a little bit more of a boost, that's where that is. And that reverb can be a little bit more of like an effect, because I have another one that's always on too, but we'll get to that. Because after that, then it goes to the tuner, right? Yeah, then it goes to the tuner, and that's because all the gain pedals are before it, so that way, like, if I have all these guys on and it's super noisy, like I just kill it like that. But then I can also just like, instead of having to wait for that to build, I can just like you know, just blast it right on if I want to. So I can kind of use that as a kill switch also, as well as a tuner. And I've heard people say before that they think that affects the accuracy of the tuner, but a couple different things with that. For one,
like if all the pedals are on though?
No, but if they're just like in the chain because it's not getting the signal direct from the guitar.
Gotcha.
For one, like guitars in general, the way they're designed, and like the way something about the way they're laid out, like they're never, from what I understand, going to be like perfectly intonated all the way up and down the neck, or at least it's rare. And also like if your tuner is perfectly calibrated, getting the purest signal from your guitar is perfectly intonated all the way up and down, like let's say all that's true, that doesn't matter if in a band scenario, really, unless everyone else is also in that situation, which is often like some bands, yeah, that's the case. If you've got techs like at your disposal and like you're on the road all the time, I get it. But I'm playing in basements and bars, like it doesn't, and I'm playing styles of music that are like, this is a wider topic for another time to delve further into, but like the sound of American popular music, you know, going all the way back to early, you know, folk music, ragtime, jazz, blues, country, early rock and roll, like all of that stuff is made from the limitations of the equipment involved and the lack of knowledge and like education from the people using it, and like it's the sound of people doing what they can with what they have, and so that it's not music that necessarily is supposed to or has to be perfectly intonated anyway.
Yeah, being sterile, for being like identical or being precisely on a note, I feel like is not necessarily going to guarantee that what you're creating will be, received with appreciation just because everything's in tune.
Right.
To like some extreme precise degree, and in most cases, there's probably a lot of range for how out of tune stuff can be before your average listener's like something sounds wrong, where like even just slightly sourness. I mean, who's to say that's not the intention of the artist? What they want anyway.
I mean, like I want my stuff to be in tune. Like I want, I set the intonation on my guitars. I haven't done it on this one in a long time. This one needs it, but I try to set it to be as good as it can be, and like I want it to sound good. But I mean, and if you're doing setups on a guitar, then yeah, you want like a really accurate tuner. Like if I'm doing a setup on one of these guitars, like I usually will take that off, and I'll put it on. Is it on strobe right now? No, but I'll usually put it on strobe for that because I feel like that's a little more accurate. I don't know, but like I said, it's just sometimes you can only chase the minutia of things so much sometimes until it's like in the reality of how you're using this, is that going to be a factor? And the fact is like a lot of times I'm just going to like a jam or just like playing, maybe I'm filling in with a band or like I'm doing something else and it's in a bar, sound is already like questionable.
A lot of
there's a lot of variables,
splashes.
so it's like that's not gonna, as long as it's like in tune on there, like that's close enough to like it still sounds fine. I guess is the point. Is like it sounds like a guitar in a rock song. But so after that, then I go to this Boss DM3 pedal that I got because I've had a few different delay pedals. I have like the Cattle and Bread Bell Epoch, like not the deluxe but the regular one, and I really like that a lot. It's like a any other day I would have this on the Echoplex. It's an Echoplex.
The lettering on there looks like.
And it's got the like a preamp in it that sounds really cool, and you can use that to make it a boost, like kind of like the Topanga one, but it's a little darker than the Topanga one. And I like that, but I swapped it out. I just wanted to try something different that was a little more simple and would be a little more like kind of what I needed, because I had that also like pretty much always just set to a slapback because it sounded so good as that, but I was like, there's so much more this thing can do. So I took it out of the equation, and I figured I can get my slapback from the Deco, which like I can't show that right now just because like I don't have stereo coming out of the Flint. But so like I don't even know if this side is like audible on it. No. So I can't really show how I do that, but this gets a good slap too. But I had a Walrus ARP87 delay before this. It's awesome. It sounds really good. It's got all these different modes. Like it's got digital, analog, tape, slap, I think. But the two things about it that made it hard to use for me the way that I needed to use a delay pedal at the time, playing in bands and stuff, was like it doesn't have a speed knob, like a repeat rate knob or anything. It's only tap tempo, which is fine, but it just, for me, that was just like a little bit more cumbersome to deal with. Like I don't really care about tap tempo that much. And if you would change the mode, then it would reset the tap tempo rate back to like the stock setting, so you'd have to tap it again. And the other thing I found with it is it had all those different modes and a bunch of different knobs on it, and so I would spend way too much time fiddling with that and like trying to like compare and like find what I really liked on it, which I liked every setting. It sounded really good everywhere, but like it was just too much for me to play with, so I would get distracted. So I got this for cheap on Reverb because it's just 3 knobs and it just does one thing. It just is like analog echo that doesn't like overtake my signal and is a nice like just kind of like thickening agent. Like the way I'll use it most of the time, like you wouldn't even probably notice that much that I have it on until I go like that, you know. But like being the only guitar player in Spit in the Wind, it just helps like give it a little bit more, like a little bit of like a thickness to it. And like some of the choruses, like we do a cover of like Supersonic Oasis, so it's like that's real helpful to kind of like get a little bit more of that sound with just one guitar player. Anyway, out of there it goes into the deco, which I use the saturation side one of two ways. If I have to be quiet, I will use it to bring the volume down here, but I can push the saturation up to get a little bit more like hair on it, just to like kind of get it to not sound like super anemic and sour. And then this is like another tape deck with like you can make it lag behind the other one by different amounts and adjust how much it wobbles to get you everything from flange to chorus to like a really good slap back to like a tape delay with just one repeat, or you can do 2 repeats if you have it bounce. And I run that stereo into the Flint, which this is just a really like nice utility pedal. Like these two are almost like utility pedals, really. Like a lot of what they do isn't that interesting, but it's just like it does the thing it needs to do perfectly. Whereas this is just a little bit of reverb. I have it set to the 70s plate setting.
Is it a like kind of like amp sim kind of?
No, it's just reverb on one side and tremolo on the other.
Okay. Do either of those Strymon pedals have additional options through like switching inside that you go through, and you can change the way outputs do certain things? Like, is there options under the hood?
There's like a thing, you open it up and there's this little pin that you have to pull out and move if you want the input to be stereo or mono, which is why I can't use this side right now. I could have if I would have switched how the pedals run, but I would have had to open them up because I think this is accepting mono input right now, and this is accepting stereo. Because the other thing with this runs stereo outs, but when everything that goes in it gets summed to mono when it comes in here, and then the one side goes out one way, and then the lag deck goes out the other way, which is really cool when you're running 2 amps because it really helps it give you like a huge amount of space. So that runs into this stereo, and then I did that way because I didn't want the stereo reverb to get summed to mono in this pedal. But I'm not using a stereo rig right now, so I don't have the other side coming out, which is fine, like for the reverb, but it will kill that. And then it just has a really nice tremolo too. Like my tremolo pedal was on the Fritz, and it was acting up, and I needed another one. And like I typically just use this tube setting. It's just this really like nice thing. It doesn't kill your volume when you turn it on. Anytime I take it to like a jam night, somebody compliments me on how the tremolo sounds. But it's also got this like harmonic tremolo, which is really cool. It can get kind of into univibe territory. Or if you want to like, Hendrix out. It's like it's not totally a univibe sound, but it's close to where like if you need an approximation, you can do that. But it also just it makes a really cool tremolo. Like if you set it a little more subtle, it just gives it a nice little bit of movement. And then it's got the photocell so you can get your, your Smith's vibes on. So yeah, that thing just rules. And then on the reverb side, I keep it on the 70s plate one because I feel like it just adds a little bit of space and it doesn't really take over. You don't really notice that it's there, but you notice if it's not there. But it does do a decent spring too. Like you can bring the brightness of it up in the mix and the decay, and it'll still get you like a pretty good but
yeah, it does. Yeah, I feel like even Topanga did too. I feel like they're different, but they both.
Yeah, they do a
good
different
job.
thing. But this one, to me, I use more of it as an effect, whereas this is more of like a utility. And then it's got this cool 80s hall reverb too. Really nice for like if you're doing like, Cure stuff. That's not the Cure, but But it's, I use that when I'm playing around at home sometimes, but I don't really use it in like a band scenario. But yeah, that's that. And I have it like basically to cover all the ground that I need it'll cover all the ground I need in Spin the Wind, but it'll cover all the ground I need in most scenarios because that's generally what I'm going to be using is like overdrive, fuzz, a compressor, a reverb, a delay, and maybe like a little bit of modulation. Like on my home board, this is also a good like go board if I just need like something real quick to take out to a gig or a jam or something, and I don't want to make too many trips. I can just set up a couple things on there and run. Like I don't necessarily need all this stuff, but it's nice to have. All right, I guess I'll set up these other overdrives with this guy, and we can walk through those real quick. This plays a role in the story of why I like this. But oh shit, you know what? Actually, I want to change this out. I'm gonna use this rat. This is a cool pedal.
Rat sort of
Yeah,
oriented,
it's based on a rat.
like an op amp distortion.
Yeah, but it's got this thing of like you can pick all these different. It's got like I think 8 different clipping modes, which I don't remember what they are. But and I haven't really played it much in a while because I just haven't needed to. Up. I wanted to kind of show the difference between this and some other distortion and overdrive pedals just to kind of like illustrate it a little bit better of like what it does differently and kind of why I like it and how I landed on it. I wanted to show a clone, but my half man pedal is at my friend's house and I couldn't get it in time. But you've seen enough, anyone watching this I'm sure has probably seen enough videos of clone centaurs that know what it fucking sounds like.
There's a lot of coverage on that.
Yeah. So anyway, similar, like I don't have a tube screamer either right now, but the Boss Super Overdrive, I feel like is more or less, it's in the ballpark. Like it's not quite the same. They have different clipping, but it does that same like kind of mid hump, which is a good sound. I mean, it loves neck picks up. This one's been modded too. Like it's got different clipping modes on it, and I don't remember what the switch on the right does, but it's whatever it does is good. But I'm pretty sure in the middle is close to stock. But I had also clipped a capacitor out of it before I had it modded, so I don't know. I've had this for 20 years. It loves neck pickups. You get this like sweetness out of it. Ray Vaughan thing, it'll do it. I mean, I can't play like Stevie Ray Vaughan, but you know. But that mid boost, it can sound really good and be really cool, but it can be a little bit too much. But where a lot of people do like to use that is to tighten up. Like guys in metal bands will use it to tighten up another distortion. So if you have an amp like a Plexi or something that like maybe doesn't get all the gain that you want, and it's got a little too much of a boomy low end, that'll like tighten it up. That'll take those low end frequencies out like we talked about earlier. So we'll kind of do that going into this. Like it will do that. But yeah, so that was kind of where I had started my overdrive journey. And then I got into the Klon style circuits from getting a soul food pedal. And I liked that because it has a mid hump, but it's not quite the same. And it was just a little more natural sounding. And I don't know that I had tried a ton more of overdrive pedals after that until I got that half-man pedal that I really like a lot. But around that time too, well, no, going back before that, at one point I had gotten a Rat, an old 80s one from a buddy of mine, and I was using that in place of a Big Muff, but I didn't know until later on when I got, not this one, but a different one, but this one will do it too, that they make a really nice low gain overdrive, but it's gonna impart a different character on it than the INDUMENTUM does. Like even with the filter knob turned pretty much down, which on a lot of Rats, these are opposite. Like if you turn it up, you get more low end, and down you get, so I've got it down pretty far though, with like trying to retain more of that low end, and it's still cutting a lot out. Like even if I took it all the way down, it's not as meaty. And this one has a lot of different clipping options on it. This is I don't remember what they are. This is kind of where I've landed on this being like kind of what I like. This one's good too. They're all good. So anyway, from there, and then this will do a different kind of high gain than this will. Like if I take the gain knob on this up, like we're getting, that's where this guy probably really comes in more handy. MacBook gave up again. But yeah, so it just does a different thing. Like this, when I take the gain all the way up on this, it's not as distorted, but it's also just, I mean, it's just a different flavor. But anyway, so at another point during the pandemic, I tried to build a pedal, and I got this kit, this build your own clone kit for the Color Sound Overdriver, because I kept reading about that, and that sounded really cool, and I just love early 70s guitar tones, and I read that a lot of people had used it, and then David Gilmour used it at one point, and yeah, who doesn't love David Gilmour? But so I got it to build it. It was a pain in the ass. I don't know that I like building pedals personally. I like doing amps, but there's just, it's such a tight fit, and like I'm not the cleanest soldering guy in the world, and so like I ended up with problems with like solder bridges. It can be a little touchy. But anyway, this one was the first overdrive I had that didn't do that thing where it cuts out the mid-range, and it was more of like a full range thing. It's super loud. It's got, this is bass, treble, gain, and master volume. It runs at 18 volts. You can run it at 9 too, and it'll distort a little quicker. But you can turn this gain knob pretty well down and bring up this volume. and just get this real pretty kind of sound out of it. Yeah, that's a great pedal, but it still just isn't. I don't know what it is. This one just. I think it's part of it is the simplicity of it. But it just gives me more of that. It's like everything I like about this pedal, but just a little bit more of it. I mean, this will do things that one won't. Like this one will get like more into fuzz territory. Partially because I think it's using like a BC 108 like silicone transistor. But this one to me just gives me much more of that like cranked amp kind of vibe that I want from an overdrive pedal. And, you know, once again, these will all stack into that fine. Like I can just throw this guy right into it if I want to. Buzzing a little much for that, but now, did you say this one has an LED clipping in it?
I believe so. I think it's 2 red LEDs.
This has an LED mode on it.
I think it might be like a soft clipping approach.
God damn it.
Not hard clipping where it's I believe soft clipping where it's in the negative feedback path of the op amp gain architecture.
This has LED clipping as well when I flip it over like that. This kid, he's not a kid anymore, but this dude, Kyle Warfel, modded that for me. I sold him my PV Windsor head, which was the first tube amp I ever had. No, it wasn't the first tube amp I ever had. The first tube I ever had is another story, and that was a Mesa Boogie 50 caliber that I made the worst gear trade of my life when I got rid of that. At the time, it was what I traded it for a PV trans tube solid state like head because that was loud and I could play metal with it, but I could have done the same thing with the Mesa Boogie if I knew how to fucking use it, but whatever. But anyway, the PV Windsor is like kind of like a Plexi or a JCM 800 or something, but it's dirt cheap, loud as balls. So I sold it to him and he came over to pick it up and he brought over some pedals that he had modded, one of which was this metal zone that I have somewhere downstairs that's really weird and cool. And like I almost never have a use for it, but it's just cool. And then he was like, "Oh, I can mod your Super Overdrive," and I was like, "Cool." And like I didn't even ask him what he was gonna do to it because I was like, "They're $40 all day, every day. So if I don't like what he does, I'll just get another one." But he told me that I don't remember any of it, but other than this, all the way to the left is LED clipping, and I think it was my favorite one of them. But I've liked this ever since I got it back from him. And then this does something else. I don't remember what. I think he said middle was stock. This, I think, gives it more low end. He did something to the gain, too. I can't remember what he said, but... I mean, it's a classic for a reason. But you can hear right away the difference in what they do. And I'm not, I don't think one is inherently better than the other one, but what I've learned is that it's really helpful if you have more than one amp to have more than one overdrive pedal, because the way an overdrive pedal is going to sound and affect your stuff is so heavily dependent on your guitar and your amps and the other pedals that are coming with it. So like I said, when I'm playing that workhorse amp, which is based on a black panel Fender, it's not a lot of mid-range, it's really loud and clean. Having something that pushes mid-range like a super overdrive or a tube screamer or a Klon sounds really good. But when I'm using this amp, sometimes, like, this doesn't sound bad with it at all. I think it sounds great. But like, there's some times when I just don't need that big of like a mid push, and I don't need like just. It's just a different thing. Like, but this. To me, it's a little more natural sounding, and it just breaks up in a different way.
I really didn't have any other pedals to want to throw into the mix too, because I feel like with like concepts that I'm wanting to move forward with, kind of like letting some of them just stay in the past, and INDUMENTUM is one of the ones that I will be continuing to make builds of, or try to keep builds available, because of it being, not so much like say for instance the crustacean, like it's just not as radical for me to want to keep on building them, when to me it's almost like it's like an inversion of like a fuzz face or something, where like it suits that job. But I feel like keeping those in stock, they're relatively simple and for assembly and all that, but with the INDUMENTUM, I don't know, like it's one of the concepts I want to keep available because of it having quirks to it that make it somewhat different than its relatives in the playing field. And I don't have enough experience with it, even like after I've kind of like implemented the second foot switch to replace the toggle switch for feedback. But yeah, I think like I should probably build one for myself that has that feature versus it as a toggle switch, and just have it more in the operation, and create like more demo videos on my own use of it. But it's kind of like I built them and then like it just kind of like didn't really I try to like put out promotion, videos and stuff for it, but sometimes it's kind of hard to, keep on talking about the same thing over and over by yourself without feeling like a little like unenthusiastic, because it's like I don't know how much further I can go with my demonstrations.
Yeah.
But having a collaboration with a person that has far more experience with like a guitar than myself definitely can open up how it can be demonstrated and explained with its functions and how you could use it.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, like my use of it had changed, and I didn't like that original video just didn't really reflect, I think, to me like how someone can use the pedal. Like, not that you can't use it the ways that I showed it in that. I think it sounds cool, but it's just like, I don't think it just showed how useful it is to just have like such a simple, like just straight up gain boost that can feed back in like that. And it cleans up too. That's one thing I always look for in an overdrive pedal is like, how's it gonna sound with the volume down? Because that just means less time that I have to like step on it. Yeah, I don't know. That's probably about the majority I can think of at the time, but unless you got other stuff you want to address with it. I have to create so many images and I have to like plan out pages and like all the, like there was so much stuff that has to go into just like just getting it started that it felt like this like insurmountable machine until eventually I was just like, all right, I'm actually gonna